Mix buses, auxes, matrices, groups. Ever been confused about all these things in a live mixer? They're all sort of the same thing, but they're just used in different ways. So in this video, we'll break down exactly what buses are and a few of the ways that we use them, and try and give you the understanding so that you can use them however you want. I've been mixing shows for years and it took me a long time to separate my buses from my matrices. This will give you a head start in that. If you're looking for a better mix, you need better EQ, so check out my 3-step guide to perfect EQ. That's at offshoreaudio.no/EQ for the free guide. Let's dive in. So let's start with buses, auxes, mixes. I'm going to call them buses mostly, I think. I'm going to try and keep the nomenclature the same, but they're an area where you collect inputs and mix them together to send further. Your left-right mix, your master bus, is a bus. It is just a place where you combine all your inputs and then send them onwards, usually to the main PA. By default, usually, the faders on our mixer surface mix to our master bus. So we create a mix using these faders, and then the master fader sends those inputs mixed onto the speakers and controls the total volume going to the speakers. When we want to create a different separate mix for our monitors, for the speakers on the stage, for the artists, we use an auxiliary bus, right? And let's call it a monitor bus. And what we do is we just collect all the inputs and mix them in different quantities, much like for the master bus, but then we just send them to a different bus and to a different location, the monitor speakers. We do the same thing for effects units. We collect different quantities of each input, put them on a bus and send them into the effects unit. The difference is that we usually talk about sending the channels directly to the effects unit, but there is this effects bus in the middle. We then take the output of the effects unit to an input channel and mix that with our other input channels to get the effect. So you see, we're usually creating a mix for a bus, or we say that we're mixing to a bus, and that's why they're called mix buses or mixes. They might also be called auxiliary buses, and auxiliary just means additional. So it's an additional bus to mix to, as in addition to our master bus, we have other buses that we can use. So how do we send sound to our buses then? There's two sort of main ways to do it, right? You've got rotary encoders and you have fader flip or sends on fader, right? Rotary encoders, you usually find them with analog and digital mixers, and you find the channel that you want to send to the bus, and then you find the rotary encoder that corresponds to that bus. So you pick your vocal channel, right? And then you find the dial that says bus 1 and you turn it up, and that sends your vocal channel to bus 1. Now on an analog mixer, there's a channel strip, so you basically find your fader and then directly above it are the rotary encoders for that channel. But on a digital mixer, you will just select the channel and then there will be a master encoder that you can use to send to a specific bus. The process is quite universal for analog mixers. The second way, sends on fader or fader flip mode, works kind of the opposite. You pick the bus that you want to send audio to, and then you'll find a button somewhere that says fader flip or sends on fader, or you might just press the bus send button twice. And what happens is that all those faders that you were previously using to mix to your master bus reset, and you are now mixing to that auxiliary bus, that additional bus, that monitor bus. And then you just push the fader up for vocal 1, for example, and that's you sending vocal 1 to monitor 1 if you had selected monitor 1. Now, you don't find this on analog mixers, so this is digital only. So let's chat a bit about where that sound comes from when it goes to the bus, right? Because you connect your microphone in and then you push your faders up and it goes to your master bus, to your main speakers normally, right? But when we send to a monitor bus or an effects bus or any other bus, we actually pick where in this signal chain that we want to pluck the sound out of. And there's quite a few places, like we could do it right after we gain it up, we could do it after EQ, but we're going to stick to the basics here, which is before the fader or after the fader, pre-fader or post-fader. And the main difference between pre-fader and post-fader is what is sort of upstream of this mix, what can affect the mix. So when we mix to a bus, we talk about sending audio to that bus, and we talk about the send being pre-fader or post-fader. Now, if you have a pre-fader send, what that means is that you can do whatever you want on your main mix to your master bus. It will not affect the quantity which is going to your monitor bus, for example. You have two completely independent mixes going to this separate master that you can send on to your monitors. However, everything upstream of the fader basically. So your gain, your EQ, and your compression still affects the pre-fader send. So if you were to turn the gain right down, you would lose sound not just in the main PA, but also in your bus. However, if you were to make a change to the mix in the PA for the audience, you would not be affecting the artist mix on the stage with your pre-fader send. If you change that to a post-fader send, what you would find is that yes, the gain still affects everything, but now if you pulled the main vocal down in the main mix for the audience, you would also be reducing that vocal in all of your monitor mixes that were post-fader sends. So it's for this reason that we tend to have pre-fader sends for our monitors. For the record, we tend to use post-fader sends for our effects units. What about groups then? Because groups are actually still a type of bus. It's just how we send the audio to the group and where the output of the group is going that differs. So instead of sending a mix to a separate output like a monitor on the stage, we tend to collect all of these inputs on this group, this bus, and then recombine them with the master mix later on. And they're also usually sent post-fader and just have like an on button. So you just choose to send that channel to that group. And it is the quantity of that input in the master mix, the main mix, that affects how much of it is in the group. But now the thing that differs is that when you assign it to a group, usually you remove it from your main mix. So your vocal fader, right, previously went straight into your master bus, but now it goes to the group instead, and you remove it from the master bus. And you might group all of your vocals together, and now you have one fader which controls all of your vocals, and you send that fader further on to your master bus. And it just gives you a kind of master control for your vocals, and you can apply processing, compression, and control the volume level all together before it then goes on to your main mix. And it's quite common to combine all of the drum microphones as well. Or you might combine just the drum shells, the kick drum, the snare drum, the toms, and then you might compress them really hard and send them further to your master output. It is also possible to do both of them together, send both the ungrouped signals and the group signals together to the master bus. And then that's how you do parallel processing, but that's for another video. So anyway, these are sub-mixes, right? They contain all the elements of your mix on a single fader that you can process separately. And finally, we come to matrices then. So what are matrices? If they are still buses, how do they differ from auxiliary buses or mixed buses, however we're going to call them? Matrices are classically a mix of mixes, right? While we might normally combine a bunch of inputs on a mix and send it to a bus, on a matrix, we combine buses and send them to the matrix and then further on to another output, right? And we often use this strategy to create copies of our master mix and send it to specific zones. So we send our main mix in its totality to matrix 1, right? And then matrix 1 goes further on to our main PA. We might have a second matrix which goes to a breakout room outside of our main PA area. We could also use it to send that mix to a recording feed or a broadcast feed. Another thing we might do is we might have that master mix, but split up going to tops, subs, front fills, delay speakers. And that way we have a set of master faders that we can use to boost up the front fills if there's not enough vocal in the front rows, or turn up the delays if it's a bit quiet at the back of the venue. Now on digital mixers, this concept of matrices being a combination of buses is actually a bit loose, because quite a lot of the time you can actually send your input channels to matrices. On Midas Pro mixers anyway, quite a lot of the time we use the matrices as effects sends so that we have more buses available just for wedges and in-ear monitors. Use this knowledge, experiment, and find out for yourself. If you need to know more about pre-fader and post-fader, I'll leave a link up here. And leave a comment, let me know what you use buses and matrices for. Other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.